Welcome everyone to the May meeting of the Finance Committee. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Ms. Wood, Ms. Frazier on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Action agenda. Request for transfer of funds attached for committee approval. Chair will entertain a motion to bring this to the floor for action. Bill, thank you. Second. Ms. Wood, thank you. Discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 2A, request to rescind resolution number 616 of 2014, awarding bid and authorizing an agreement with TAG Consulting Group for indirect cost analysis for Warren County, because TAG Consulting Group was unable to meet the specified insurance requirements. Chair will entertain a motion to bring item 2A to the
I'll
floor.
move A and B.
We have a motion to move 2A and B. Evelyn, are you on the second? Evelyn Wood on the second, thank you. Any further discussion? Mike, what do we have here?
Basically, this is for our indirect audit, which is done as a requirement, but actually we do save some money with this. We put it out for bid last year. The low bidder couldn't come up with the insurance, so we've decided to walk away from that one, and we need a resolution to rescind that and a resolution to go with the next highest bidder, who we have used in the past and is very competent.
All righty, any questions for the treasurer? There being none, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion to approve items 2A and B signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 3, referral from the County Facilities Committee, Building and Grounds, request to approve $16.5 million serial bond for court expansion project. Chair will entertain a motion regarding item 3A. Mr. Taylor, Ms. Frazier, thank you on the second. Mike, you want to?
Actually, could I, if I might, just get us started, Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely.
And turn it over to Mike. I've handed out a series of documents for your review. As part of this process, this morning, you're also going to be getting a copy of the draft serial bond resolution from Larry Distributing. You've already done that?
No, but you have that.
I have that. Do I have all of your copies?
No.
We will make those copies. But what we've done here is we wanted to give you the full packet of materials, just as if this were your board meeting on the 15th, okay? So what you have is, in order to get this project finalized, if you will, on the 15th, you're going to need to adopt a serial bond resolution, which Larry will talk about. But you're also going to need to complete seeker. You've done some seeker work on this already. The documents that you have in front of you are the final completion documents for the environmental assessment form and a proposed determination of non-significance for the court expansion project. You also have before you a resolution that, if entertained, it's in draft form, but if entertained at the May 15 meeting, would approve the final concept, would complete seeker, and would authorize Clark Patterson Lee to conduct tasks. You do have them? Tasks 4 through 8 of their project scope. So Larry is now going to hand out the serial bond resolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make that brief introduction to just introduce those documents that we're handing out.
Thank you. Mike, maybe you should go to the podium here for any questions that we might have as well for you.
Well,
I guess I would start, and I know Larry's here as well, but I guess my question for you is that this is in accord with what you discussed at the full board meeting in terms of your strategy of approach and in terms of how best to finance this project, and in fact the discussion that we had here in the last committee of finance where you discussed the approach as well, and I just want to make sure that this is all in concert with your recommendations.
yes, it is. We have to, rather than do this several times, it's prudent to just do the resolutions and get it all done now for a maximum amount. We do not have to go to bond for $16.5 million. We can choose any denomination within that, and we can even go a couple of times as long as we don't exceed the 16.5 million. So, as far as the resolution and so forth, I mean, I'm gonna turn that over to the attorneys, because
Good.
that's what we have them for. That's not my bailiwick, I'm the financial end of this. But this is, in my suggestions, that this is the way we need to go. We need to get this done now. The interest rates are creeping up ever so slightly, so the sooner we can get to this, the better off we're gonna be. The only thing I do need to do, I guess, is sit down with whoever is doing the planning, and Clark Patterson Lee, and our superintendent of DPW, to make sure that that 8 million that I was talking about is a good solid figure. Because I don't wanna go too high, but I don't wanna cut us short either. If they feel that we need more money to get the building constructed, then we need to get that figure hammered out pretty quickly.
Very good, thank you, Mike.
As bond counsel to the county, we prepared the serial bond resolution for the Board of Supervisors to hopefully adopt at the May 15th meeting. Just to quickly walk you through it, the description is a very broad description, and it includes not just the construction, but also the soft costs related to the project. We have determined that we use 16.5 million. It's my understanding that the actual construction costs are about construction costs and some of the related soft costs are about 16.1 million, but it's been our experience and my advice to the county attorney that we put a maximum amount, as Mike indicated, that you can never exceed the amount that you adopt the resolution for, but you can bond a much lower amount if you choose to do so. You don't need the full cost. So rather than come back and try to amend and go through all the things that we would have to do if for some reason there was an increased cost of a couple $100,000, the thought is adopt a resolution for the full 16.5 million, and then as you go through, you determine the amount of financing you're going to need to complete the project. We have created a useful life of 25 years. All the models that I've seen are 20-year financing, so we're more than adequately covered as far as the duration. Obviously the treasurer is the chief fiscal officer of the county, who would be responsible for signing the bonds themselves. And so there is a requirement, once this gets adopted, that we will publish a legal notice of estoppel, so that after 20 days, if there's no action brought in connection with this resolution, then the financing could proceed. So I don't know if there are any questions about the actual resolution itself or the dollar amount that we've chosen.
Mike?
Chairman, Larry, it's been described by Mike and the supervisors as we've been going through this process that we would, borrow 8 million here and 8 million there, as the case may be, as part of Mike's plan. Larry, could you explain for all of us how that bond resolution of 16.5 works in connection with that type of arrangement? Does it impact it in any way? Does it impede or prohibit us from borrowing over time in components or parts?
Not at all. That's the point that Mike was raising. We adopt the resolution, the county adopts the resolution for the full 16.5 million. Once you adopt the resolution, you delegate the authority to sign for the various amounts of financing up to the 16.5 million. Whether it's done in an $8 million bond 1 year and an $8 million bond the next year, whether it's done in short-term financing with bond anticipation notes, which is another alternative that could be utilized, or a combination thereof. You may do an $8 million bond knowing for sure that you need the construction financing. You take advantage of the interest rate environment. You do a 20-year serial bond for the $8 million. You may then decide to do a $4 million bond anticipation note because the timing of the rest of the project may get stretched out, and then you can do another $8 million serial bond. It would then pay off the $4 million bond anticipation note, so you're not aggregating to $20 million, but the total amount of financing that could happen is $16.5 million. How it gets parceled out over time is really going to be up to the treasurer, who you're delegating the authority to make that determination. But the purpose of this resolution is to authorize the full $16.5 million.
Peter?
I just have one question. I understand the $16.5 million being locked in as the maximum amount. Is the interest rate also locked in?
When we go to bond for whatever particular dollar amount gets locked in at that point, yes.
Okay, so it's not locked in for $16.5 million?
No, no.
The bonds have not been, nothing's been
Nothing's
sold
been-
yet.
yeah.
And so until you sell, there's a bidding process that's required, and you're obligated to take the lowest net interest cost of the bids. But that will happen, hopefully shortly, but depending on what the information is that Mike gets, will determine the amount of that initial bond and if there's gonna be any short-term financing. When it's actually sold is when the interest rate gets affected. And all the models I've seen do not have any type of mechanism for altering the interest rate once it is determined. There may be different interest rates for the bonds depending on the maturity. So if it's a 20-year bond, the interest on the first year may be lower than the interest on the 20th year, but there's a combined net interest cost that will be fixed once the bonds are sold. Is that
Yeah, that really gets, I guess what I was getting to is there any advantage to taking the full bite initially? Taking the
Well-
$16.5 million, locking that interest rate in with the assumption being, and that it is an assumption that interest rates are indeed going to rise.
Well, like I explained before, if we borrowed $16.5 million and we only use $8 million to build the building, and we were sitting on another $8.5 million for 2 years or 2.5 years before we start the renovations in the existing building, I'm only gonna be able to get maybe 1.5 points on that $8 million sitting in the bank, and we're gonna be paying 3.5% or more, which to me is not sound fiscal policy. So I would rather gamble a little bit that 3.5 may end up being 3.75 in 2 years when we go to get the rest of the money. Plus, I don't think that we're gonna need a full $8.5 million to do the renovations that we're talking about. So why should we borrow more than we actually need to do the work?
Thank you.
Peter, I think the answer to your question is if we do it this way, it provides us the flexibility should we really begin to worry about those interest rates, because those rising interest rates will affect the payback and the cost of this project in a huge sort of way. So I think it's a wise approach that we've,
The other side of this is that we can structure this so that the first 2 years at $8 million, we're only gonna have to make interest payments, which will amount to roughly $350,000, which will help us financially while we're still obligated with Westmount and the finances that we have to deal with there. This way, we're not jeopardizing our sound fiscal statute right now, because we're gonna have very low payments for the first 2 years of this, and then jump into starting to pay when we go to the
alrighty. So, bringing it back to the committee, what we're looking for from the committee today is, action on this, serial bond resolution. However, these other the environmental assessment, action will take place at the, full board meeting.
Correct.
Do you need an action from this committee to move the environmental assessment along?
No.
I don't think so.
That will all take place on the 15th, as it ordinarily would, at the same time that the board adopts the serial bond resolution. You have taken some action to authorize a serial bond resolution at a prior meeting. I believe that may have been 2 months ago, Mr. Chairman. My recommendation at this point in time, however, would be, unless special counsel disagrees, I think we should move this particular serial bond resolution forward to the board meeting on the 15th. All other action would be reserved until that time.
Is that your recommendation?
That's correct.
That's the recommendation. Well, what's the pleasure of the committee regarding this? Thank you, second, thank you, Bill, Bud on the motion, Bill on the second. I think it's fair to say, it's a large borrowing. I can understand, our apprehension. On the other hand, I think that our treasurer has provided, the best possible financial approach, to try to, handle this from a budgeting point of view, given our present financial situation, so. With that said, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the serial bond resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item 3B, Jeff, you're on deck. Request for approval of revised court space expansion project plans, Clark Patterson Lee Work Task 4-8, as well as to identify a source of funding for the costs associated with tasks 4 through 8. Chair will entertain a motion to bring item 3B to the floor for consideration. Evelyn, thank you. Edna on the second. Where's Jeff? Is he here? What do we have in front of us now?
The facilities, committee has met and reviewed the latest plans for the court space. There was some, modifications based on comments from OCA, and, those issues and comments have been incorporated into the final plan, and that was reviewed in detail at facilities, a week or so ago. The concept as it stands now is substantially the same as it has been, since the board last voted on that. And, we had concurrence in facilities to move that ahead, so that is our next step. The OCA, the Office of Courts Administration, we've been working with them throughout the design process, the concept process. We're anticipating that within the next, week or so, and certainly hopefully before the May board meeting, the Facilities Review Board will meet and give the formal approval of the concept plan as it stands now, and then we'll be ready to initiate, the final design work, the engineering work, as was stated in the last resolution that passed.
Very good. And Paul, do you have a recommendation regarding the source of funding?
My recommendation on a source of funding will be to put that as part of the 16.5 serial bond. There will be some upfront costs that would have existed the serial bond, which we'll have to pay for, but it'll be minimal. But the cost going forward should certainly be rolled into the project, and I believe the 16.5 million figure was anticipating that, correct, Jeff?
Yes, the 16.5 includes all of the construction costs and the soft costs, to include all those tasks, 4 through 8, for engineering. One of my concerns, though, and what I was talking with Mike about was, as this advances through the board, when will be the earliest time where some funding will come into the project, and give Clark Patterson the green light for design work. And as you saw in the packet, they gave a pretty detailed breakdown of those 4 tasks, or tasks 4 through 8. There's an immediate need to initiate task 4 with Clark Patterson in order for me to sign that letter of authorization, get them rolling, and so we don't lose time in design. That task 4 is on page 24 of the packet. That task 4, that design development, is the next engineering task, and I'd like to be able to move that ahead immediately. I understand the bonding would occur even if we do a ban or something else, preemptively, or the bonding would be somewhat of a delay. So, thus far, as you know, the board has used general fund reserves or surplus to advance the project thus far. To consider some immediate funding to get Clark Patterson initiated into that design work, so we don't lose time.
Just to kind of pull this together, if the committee will allow me, I mean, what you're suggesting, Paul, is there would be some kind of due from situation to handle the cash flow. Mike, are you satisfied with that, or is?
We need to get this moving, and it's gonna be a couple of months, I mean, from now, before the bond is all taken care of, and we've got, the money from that, so whatever, we need to do between now and then. I'm not sure how you wanna handle that, where you wanna take the money from, but.
With the permission of the committee, Mr. Chairman, what I could do is work the numbers up that we're gonna need, and then prepare a resolution that would just identify where the money's temporarily being moved from, to what account, so that Jeff is taken care of. And, we also wanna make sure that, obviously, it can be repaid with the serial bond, so I don't wanna, start spouting off accounts and numbers today without just making sure that we do everything correctly. So if I could just have that little bit of leeway, I could then give that to you. It would come out Tuesday in your packet as part of any transfers, but we'd cover it that way.
All right, so for today's purposes, then, what's being recommended on 3B is, I guess, a period after, third sentence, task 4-8, and, Paul will be back to us at a later date relative to identifying, the source of the funding for cash flow purposes, if that's satisfactory to the committee. No, have we had a motion? Oh, I believe we have. Oh, so, is that, who made that motion to bring it to? All right, now, Evelyn, Edna, are you satisfied with that on your motion? Thank you. All righty, any further discussion? Jeff?
This just occurred to me, we will have some modification costs for contemporary measures. And as we've completed really the formal solution, for the court expansion, we're transitioning back, and we've had, some initial meetings already with the court staff and our engineers and my facility staff, regarding some temporary measures, because we know this is not gonna be complete by January 1 when the new judge and his staff, and his or her staff arrive. Does the bond resolution authorize some of that funding, to be used for temporary measures? These will be temporary measures that will carry us through 2016, they'll be undone, they won't be part of the final court expansion. I don't remember seeing that, but.
Jeff, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna ask that our special counsel be recognized to answer that question.
Yeah, what is it that is the temporary measures that you're talking about? Because if they're not part of the construction of the court expansion, then they would not be included in the resolution. So if the temporary measures are hiring, getting a trailer, for example, that would not be included. But what are the temporary measures that you're describing?
Right now, what they're discussing is some building modifications and really condensing some areas on a temporary basis to be able to accommodate it within the building. But there will be some engineering costs. We've actually already initiated some hazard surveys with my facilities budget, and there'll be some engineering costs relative to that, and there'll be some construction costs relative to that. The goal will be to be able to accommodate that staff for a year, and meanwhile, we'll advance the construction, and then those same areas that we're anticipating they'll occupy for that year will be modified again as part of the later phases of the final construction project.
Is that part of the $16.1 million that was originally estimated?
It is not part of the original 16.1.
We have an estimate of what that cost is, Jeff?
We don't. We've just started that discussion. So some of the concepts we've thrown around are, the building modifications to be able to basically crunch people together for that short duration. We've also talked about off-site. We've talked about on-site temporary buildings, and that's being worked out. If it's not part of the bond resolution, I guess I just want to make the committee aware that that's another piece that we're still working on, and I can come back to through facilities, certainly when we have a better plan if that works.
So just to answer your question and then tie it in with the dollar amounts, if it has to do with the construction of this site, and if there are engineering or surveys or things that have to be done that will push forward this project, they would be included in the bond resolution. However, anything that would be off-site would not. Anything that would be deemed to be like a trailer, for example, for temporary quarters would not. So we need to know more specifically what it is that you're considering to make a determination as to whether it would be in or out of the bond resolution. However, that goes back to the point of the $16.5 million. This project was initially established at $16.1 million. At my recommendation to Martin, we said that we should have some leeway because there are some uncertainties that do occur, and we don't want to come back again to modify the resolution for $100,000 or $200,000. Not knowing what the extent of that is, if it's not part of that original $16.1 million, it'll have an impact on what the total dollars of this project are going to be. So it's kind of hard to answer your question without knowing the specifics, and especially not knowing the dollar amount, what impact that will have on the total $16.5 million.
Paul?
Mr. Chairman, I think we can work all through this. The bond resolution covers what it covers, and I think, that'll be fine. If we get together, Jeff, and we work through this, and we get a better understanding of what the plans are and what the numbers are, what can be picked up by the bond resolution can be picked up by that. County's in a solid enough financial position that, depending upon what the costs are, we may be able to pick those up right out of our current funds and not have to worry about bonding. There's another alternative that goes through my mind, and I'm sure Larry will agree, it's always possible to do a separate bond resolution for these other expenditures and maybe do, you know, maybe you do a bond anticipation note out over 3 or 4 years to spread that cost. I think we have a number of ways to handle it. I don't think we have to worry about it today, but I do think we have to come back to the County Facilities Committee with a plan, and we also have to come back to this committee with a plan.
I would agree with you, Paul.
Mr. Gerard?
As we move forward, you know, discussing with the judges, because they've been very helpful, and the staff, for these temporary measures, I guess where we're headed, so that we're all on the same page and we're productive with where the money comes from, is that we'll be renovating areas that have to be renovated for the final existence of our project, but we're gonna use them in a temporary capacity, and then we'll move that out and finish the more intricate way that the design is. So it's, you know, much of it is structural removal, stuff that is going to be done for the project in and of itself. So it seems, our common sense approach is that should be part of the bond, but we're not the ones to give those answers. We're asking how we proceed, so we document and do it fairly and accordingly, so that, but we understand that if we move things out and it goes to another area, that's not inclusive, if we have to make room, but we're looking for direction, and I guess in that vein, correct, Jeff?
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I think the concepts as we're discussing them now, there is some overlap where, for instance, the hazard survey that we're gonna be doing in a portion of the law library now is one that would have to be done as part of the final plan anyway. So I think, you know, Supervisor Gerard is correct. There are some of the things that certainly are moving ahead, portions of those phases that are gonna complete the full project, and certainly our goal is to not do a lot of work that has to get undone. We're trying to work this so that it makes sense and we're not redoing areas needlessly. There will be some, but I think the cost will be, you know, a portion of the overall cost will be specific to that temporary measure. The majority of it will likely be in support of the final plan.
I think I understand. I think what they're saying is they're gonna have to do some of the renovation work as part, in conjunction with with the new construction, because there are people that need to be moved. But a large part of the renovation work is gonna lend itself to the renovation plan that comes later. So it relates to, Mike, how much money we, so I think communication between Jeff and the Treasurer's Office and Paul is critical here. And any costs that we do have a little bit within the bond, as Larry has indicated, but he's being careful because he's not quite sure exactly the dollar amount that I mean, if we're talking, and I think the administrator and everyone's well aware of what we have within the budget, and if there should be, and really what we're looking to avoid is, certainly don't want any unpleasant surprises.
I think we can work this through, and I think that as long as we come back to the County Facilities Committee, Jeff, with a plan at the next meeting, bring it through here, I think what you're gonna find is some of the expenses will be covered under the bond. Other expenses we may have to come up with some cash for. Unless I'm totally shocked, I don't see these as unmanageable numbers at this point.
Would you agree with that?
I agree completely, and, you know, the 16.1 does have some contingency built into it, and I think the 16.5 authorization is the best and most prudent way to approach it, and I'm comfortable with those numbers.
The only thing I would recommend from the committee, Dan, is when the facilities deals with this issue, that perhaps, Jeff, you could at least come back and give us a report as to how all of this is worked out, so we're fully aware.
Yeah, we're working on that, we will be doing that, we can't be too definitive yet, because the judge has to check with a library committee, OCA has to agree, the security issues, we're right back in that realm, so they've been very cooperative. It looks like the best frame that we could go forward efficiently and get it done, so we're encouraged, and as it develops, I think in the next month or two, we'll know where we're headed. but this is, we wanted you to know that there's other costs, but we'd like to know what we can get out of the bond, because it looks like we had to do that work anyway, much of it's structural, et cetera. So, we'll keep you apprised on that, so that the finances can work accordingly, and, we'll be very thorough about bringing back the facilities and how we're proceeding when we get the okays.
Any further discussion from the committee regarding this? There being none, are we ready for the question then? All those in favor of item 3B, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3B is carried. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Referral from the Criminal Justice Committee Probation, request to amend the 2015 county budget to reflect the receipt of unanticipated revenues and appropriations in an amount of $2,500 for grant funding provided by the Warren Washington Victims Impact Panel in order to pay consultant Walter Joseph Lashway to facilitate 3 sessions for the remainder of the year. Chair will entertain a motion regarding item 4. Jean, thank you. Evelyn, on the second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 5, referrals from the Health Services Committee, Westmount. Item 5A, request to amend the county budget to appropriate funding in the amount of $811,794 from the Westmount Health Facility fund balance to various budget codes within the Westmount Health Facility operating budget to cover operating expenses. Chair will entertain a motion to bring 5A to the floor. Edna? Bud, thank you. On the second, any further discussion? There being none, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of item 5A signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 5A is carried. Item 5B, pursuant to discussion at last Health Services Committee meeting, County Treasurer to advise what additional appropriations would be required and when they would occur to continue the operation of the facility beyond October 31, 2015. You have any updates, Mike, that share with us at this time?
Actually, this is the first I've heard about this.
Okay.
I can get you something for the next meeting.
All right, fine.
The bottom line is that we're projecting X number of dollars per month, and if we go beyond October 31st, it's not gonna, in my opinion, right now, it's not gonna change, unless something drastic happens. It's still gonna be that $165,000, $66,000 per month.
I think what the committee was interested in, the Finance Committee knowing, was that there's obviously going to be additional expenses here, and this order of magnitude, I would think, would have to come out of our fund balance. This is not the kind of thing that can be handled within the existing, Westmount's existing operating condition.
No, I don't.
Well, there,
I guess I gotta rephrase that. I'm not sure at this point. I mean, it depends on IGT funds coming through, and I mean, there's a lot of different variables. So, I
And
mean, if nothing comes up, then yeah, the county's gonna have to take it out of the fund balance. I mean, that's the only other place we have.
well, I think we were fortunate, if you'll recall, there was a fund balance at the Westmount funds, and so I think that depending upon how things work out through the end of the year, there's also a cash flow need of that operation. So we're gonna have to study that to see whether or not we can use more of that fund balance, or whether we'll have to solicit some of the county funds. But I think we're in a pretty good position right now in terms of being able to move through the year. Obviously, it would have been nice if we could have closed. We'd be in a better financial position at this point. But as far as having anticipated this going forward on the county budget, I think we're fine, and we'll be fine through the end of the year, and we're hoping that this process will conclude itself before the end of the year.
All right, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Paul. Item 6, referral from the Human Services Committee, Employment and Training, request to amend the 2015 county budget to reflect the receipt of unanticipated revenues and appropriations in the amount of $2,451 received through the Federal Trade Adjustment Act as reimbursement for the costs associated with training for 2 dislocated workers. Chair will entertain a motion regarding item 6A. Evelyn, Edna on the second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 6B, request to amend the 2015 county budget to reflect the receipt of unanticipated revenues and appropriations in the amount of $40,000 in federal aid provided for the new BIP, Balance Incentive Program, Caregiver Support Program. Chair will entertain a motion regarding this item. Evelyn Wood moves items 6B and C. Is there a second on that? Edna on the second, thank you. Any further discussion? There being none, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 7, referral from the Occupancy Tax Coordination Committee, request to appropriate funding in the amount of $68,702 from the Occupancy Tax Reserve A.881.00 to Budget Code A6417-469 Tourism Occupancy Other Payments Contributions to make the final distributions of 2014 occupancy tax collections to other municipalities. Cheryl, did a motion. Bill, on the motion, Jean on the second. Jean Merlino on the second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor of item 7 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 7 is carried. Item 8, referrals from the Public Works Committee, request to increase capital project H351.950280 CR44 over Hudson River Bridge painting project in the amount of $50,400 to include the 80% federal share. Chair will entertain a motion regarding item 8A. Mr. Merlino?
A and B.
Jean, A and B. We have a motion to move items A and B, and a second by Mr. Kenny. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 9, referral from the Traffic Safety Board, request to amend the 2015 county budget to reflect the receipt of $4,320 in State Stop DWI Association crackdown grant funds. Chair will entertain a motion regarding item 9. Evelyn on the second. Jean on the second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor of item 9 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 9 is carried. Item 10, request items to be discussed by the county administrator. A journal report identifying transfers authorized by the county administrator, and discussion concerning Westmount impact bargaining negotiations, terms of memorandum of understanding, including fiscal terms. A request will be made for an executive session. So why don't we take item A first, Paul?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, as is the practice, my office handles the transfers, and we also issue a report that's been provided to the committee. I always kind of look through it to see what items might spark your attention, and you'll see a $20,000 item on DPW, but I want to assure you what that was a wrong budget code, and it's just moving money around, so it's not new money. And that happens when you have such a large department, so that didn't surprise me. We had another fairly large expense in Office of the Aging, which is $3,300, but they were able to move money around for that. That was to cover a dishwasher in the town of Johnsburg, in case that catches somebody's eye. We had a fairly large expense in tourism of $10,000, but that was a new social media contract that was approved by the committee. But there are, of course, ample funds in the tourism budget to cover that. And then you'll see a number of transfers in Westmount, which here again, based on the things that are happening in the facility, none of these surprise me. Probably the biggest one you might see is the $10,000 transfer in the Westmount administration, and this is to cover emergency agency staffing when needed, and it was a transfer among their codes. Everything else you'll see is pretty small numbers, and the reason for that is that we run very, very tight budgets. And you know, if we built a little bit more fluff in the budgets, I guess you wouldn't see all these transfers. But on the other hand, personally, I like seeing real tight budgets, and when I see these types of transfers, just so you know, it doesn't bother me. It just tells me that we're running very, very tight budgets, and we know right away when you know, extra money is needed for anything or anything steps out of balance. I actually kind of like this, and it just keeps the county finances, you know, very, you know, I think better oversight, better view, rather than, like I say, just giving a lot of money in budgets and not seeing anything.
Yeah, very good. Are you still going to need an executive session?
Yes.
Alrighty, can we tackle items 11 and 12? Is there going to be any action coming out of executive session, or is it strictly informational?
I believe there may be some action. I guess it'll depend on you know, what the special counsel has to report.
All right, then I think we should, Chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session. Martin, you might want to specify specifically why we would be going into executive session for the record.
We are going into executive session, for the purpose of, discussing impact bargaining negotiations with CSEA, specifically with the Westmount Health Facility.
You have a motion to go into executive session, but on the motion, second on the motion, to go into Evelyn, thank you. To go into all in favor? All right, we are in executive session, Hey, Bud, I didn't know you had a law.
Oh, yeah.
Taylor Law.
I did that in one of my first careers.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, can we move this along? I think a bunch of us have another meeting at 11:30.
Yes.
No, I'm with you.
You're
I'm
going-
moving as quickly as I can here, Gene.
Depending upon how long-winded Lloyd is, this won't take long.
We got 30 seconds.
Oh, well.
In case you wanna know, all of you are on TV, so.
Oh, well.
Work's gonna go over 8 hours. Oh, no. I wanted to eliminate it. Well, that went over like hell. That became known as Taylor Law.
Everybody's here, who's gonna be here, I guess? I didn't see Don out there, so.
Alrighty, let's, move on to item 11, County Attorney and Westmount Administrator to discuss managed long-term care contract with Fidelis and required amendment. And, Martin, could you fill us in?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Beginning July 1, nursing homes in New York State will be under what's called long-term managed care. And it's my understanding that on July 1, New York State has designated 2 companies that new patients at that time, not existing patients, but new patients, once they do their wind down, correct, Lloyd, will be able to apply for the Medicare payments. Medicaid payments under on July 1. It's a new program. It's the future is here with this. The 2 companies that New York State has designated that can do business here in Warren County are Fidelis Care, New York, and also a company by the name of VNSNY. We have an agreement with Fidelis Care. It was executed in 2013. It's not used very much, correct, Lloyd, if at all. But what we did was we reached out to Fidelis Care because we need to have an agreement in place with them on July 1st for this long-term managed care. Consulted with the county administrator. County administrator asked us, Lloyd and myself, to take it upon ourselves to handle this. We have. We reached out to Fidelis. Fidelis got back to us, and they want to use their 2013 agreement with an amendment to that agreement, which will incorporate some new state and federal clauses, and will incorporate a new rate for one item under the contract, skilled nursing services and reimbursement custodial/intermediate care. Right now, that has a rate of $210 per diem in our current contract, and they want to change that to 100% Medicaid published rate per diem. That's acceptable to us, and the contract is the contract. We think it's important to have a contract in place for July 1. That's why we're bringing it to your attention now, so that it can be hopefully approved on May 15th. The chairman can execute the amendment, send it back to Fidelis, and then it's my understanding that Fidelis then has to go through a approval process with DOH, but these contracts are being approved by DOH as I understand it. We've reached out to VNSNY with the same request. We have not heard back from them. Lloyd heard from a company, and they're supposed to be sending us a proposal, VNA Home Care Options. That's out there as well, that we understand that since we got the publication from New York State saying that your 2 companies are Fidelis and VNSNY, that has been amended to include VNA home care options. So it's like anything else, the more options you have for your patients, the better. We would like, permission to amend the Standard Skilled Nursing Services Agreement with Fidelis Care New York so that we can be compliant, with the managed long-term care, on July 1.
Pleasure of the committee. I have a motion by Supervisor Wood, seconded by Supervisor Taylor. Any further discussion? There being none, ready for the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We will need a resolution and action required on items approved by the Personnel Committee. Personnel item agenda items 2B, 4, and 5. Mr. Taylor on the motion, Personnel Chairman. Edna on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any other business to come before the committee?
The mailroom, thing separately, I don't think that's what's on, do we do anything with regard to finance for the mailroom position?
Oh, yes, the transfer of funds would be part of that, by this committee, and we, with your permission, we'll put that on for the board agenda.
Okay, I'll make that motion if we need to do that.
Okay. Jean on the second. We'll move that along to the full board. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Any other business to come before the committee?
Just had a question all the way back to 5. $1,811,000 to be spent from the fund balance at Westmount. I guess my question is there any chance that we're going to eat that $400,000 for those general funds?
I think this ties to a question that was asked earlier in terms of Westmount and how we're going to end up. I think your response was May would have been better than October, but...
Right. Yeah, it's a little complicated because of the way we budgeted it, and I think that makes it a little confusing. Because we budgeted through the end of May, we actually ended up with a larger fund balance in the fund than was originally projected when we were looking at some of the numbers. I think you might have recalled something like a little over a $600,000 fund balance, but that was assuming for the year. So because we budgeted through May and now we've budgeted through the end of October, we actually are able to draw down on that fund balance for the 811, and it still will leave a fund balance there. That's why I was trying to be, I didn't want to have any misrepresentations made out here when people were talking about the fund balance, because depending upon, when we exactly close, that fund balance may or may not still exist. The bottom line is that when we do close, you'll have the influx of cash of $2.3 million, and at the bare minimum, that can be used to repay the county. That'll also be funds that we use to pay other costs that are associated with the transaction. The net out, and then what I'm going to be recommending to you is the net out of that money that's left over, that we save that aside to cover future legacy costs that will continue with the facility. So at the end of the day, when everything's all washed out, we'll come out fine as long as we close this year. And unfortunately, I didn't bring the numbers with me for next year, but and I'll be happy to go over them with you at some point, but if you see the closing like in October, November, December of this year, and then we look out over the sources of funding and revenues over the next few years in the county budget, you'll see it gets very good. And that's because it all comes together very nicely and works. But without having the exact documents, I don't want to start quoting numbers, but we will be able to cover, the county will not, when the facility is sold, I guess the short answer to the question is when the facility is sold, the county will be able to square away all its books and still have money left over to cover the legacy cost.
Ready. Chair, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Edna? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Evelyn on the second. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Hey, Jane. Jane, you had just 1 second?